Hello everyone and welcome to today's International Economics class conducted by Pratap hegde for the Bcom 4th semester classes. Dear students, today we are going to talk about the second theory of international trade, that is the theory of comparative cost advantage or the cost comparative theory. In the previous sections we studied about the absolute cost advantage theory, which was developed by Adam Smith, and today we are going to talk about the comparative cost advantage theory, which is developed by David Ricardo. He started with a less favorable situation to the both countries. What happens if one country has absolute cost advantage in the production of both commodities and the other country has got absolute disadvantage in the production of both the commodities? This scenario is slightly different from the theory which was developed by Adam Smith, in which he had assumed that one country has absolute advantage in the production of only one commodity and the other country has the absolute advantage in the production of some other commodity. That's why these two countries indulge themselves in foreign trade. But here the scenario is slightly different compared to the absolute advantage theory. Here a developed country has advantage in the production of both the commodities compared to the other country. But will the country produce both the commodities, or will it choose to produce only one commodity in which it has comparatively more advantage than the production of the other commodity? Here, according to Adam Smith, under such circumstances trade cannot take place, but Ricardo maintained that trade takes place between the two countries because of the comparative cost advantage. Here he makes certain assumptions before developing the theory. There are only two countries producing two commodities. Second assumption is that there is free trade between two countries, and the third one is perfect mobility of labor within each nation but immobility between two nations. So there is no mobility of labor between two countries. The next assumption is constant cost of production. The cost of production does not change over time. Then there is assumption of no transportation cost, and also there is no technical change in the production of both the commodities in both the countries. So under these assumptions, David Ricardo develops this theory. The economist David Ricardo, in his book Principles of Political Economy and Taxation, systematically represented this comparative cost theory. He emphasized that the countries can gain from trade not only if they had an absolute advantage as put forward by Adam Smith, but also if they had a comparative advantage in the production. Ricardo demonstrated that trade could take place even in the absence of absolute advantage, provided there is a comparative advantage in the production of a certain commodity. Next, a country should produce and specialize in the goods for which it has the lowest and wood output will be maximized. An advanced country may be more efficient than an underdeveloped nation in every line of production, but its degree of superiority may differ from one commodity to another. According to him, the advanced country is said to have a comparative advantage in the commodity in which the degree of superiority is higher, and a comparative disadvantage in the good in which the degree of superiority is lower compared to non-developed countries. Here, in order to explain this theory, he takes example of two countries, namely Portugal and England. The two goods that they produce in the example are wine and cloth, as these were the main production areas in the two countries. He expresses the cost of these was the main production in labor time. So this cost of production is defined in terms of labor units. Further, he supposes that Portugal can produce 25 units of wine or 20 units of cloth with 1 unit of labor, and according to him, England can produce 1 with 1 unit of labor, it can produce 10 units of wine, and with the same unit of labor, England can produce 15 units of cloth. So in this example, we can clearly see that Portugal has the absolute advantage over the production of both the commodities, and England has absolute disadvantages. But will the Portugal produce both the commodities, or does England will not produce any of the commodity because it has disadvantage in the production of both the commodities? The answer is no. The Portugal, which has more advantage in the production of wine, or the Portugal can produce more units of wine with only 1 unit of labor, it will choose to produce wine, and it will try to employ more number of labor in the production of wine, and it will choose to buy or purchase cloth from England, in which it has comparatively less disadvantage. So with the example, or with in this diagram, we can see that the production possibility curve of Portugal here, it can produce 25 units of wine, and it can produce 20 units of cloth, and also England can produce 10 units of wine with the same unit of labor, and 15 units of cloth with the 1 unit of labor. So by this, the Portugal will only focus on producing wine in which it has more advantage, and it will try to import cloth from the England because it has absolutely less disadvantage. So this theory has many criticisms also. Some of the grounds in which this theory was criticized was the theory of comparative cost is based on the labor theory of value, which has been discarded very long back. So the production cannot be measured in terms of the labor units. It has other measurement values in which it has to be taken into account. Another criticism of this comparative cost theory is that it is based on the assumption of constant cost of production, but in the real world it is not possible. So this is not a very serious criticism of the comparative cost theory, as the modern economists have explained it. When the cost of production is increasing, changing, cost of production determines the comparative cost ratios. The comparative cost theory is also been criticized on the basis that the assumption of no transport cost, but within the countries there will be transportation cost, and the transportation cost cannot be ignored. And another area of criticism, it is also that Ricardo did not explain the determination of the terms of trade. It was J.S. Mill, another economist, who explained the factors determining the terms of trade. So the David Ricardo's formula or the David Ricardo's theory fails to explain the terms of trade in between these two countries. So to summarize, we can say that in the real world, modern economies or modern countries will have absolute advantage in the production of many goods and services compared to other non-developed countries, but the developed countries will not decide to produce each and every commodity in which it has absolute advantage. It will only produce those goods and commodities in which it has purely absolute advantage, and it decides to import other goods and services which other countries are producing at a lesser advantage. By this way, the modern countries can involve their unit of labors in the production of the goods and services in which they have absolute advantage. So that's all for today. Let's focus on the other topics in the next video. Thank you.